What up, partners? Stoked to talk to you again. It's middle of the week, or it is where I am. I don't know when you're listening to this, or if you're listening to it in the car, running errands, or around your house, or who knows, going to pick up the kid, regardless, or kids. Regardless, I am so honored that you choose to spend time here, not only with me, but our incredible world freaking wide community of partners of commercial fishermen, supporters of, friends and family. People are interested in our community. Thanks for coming and being here with us. And if you're new here, I'm your host, Megan Waldrop. Welcome to the Partners of Commercial Fisherman podcast, where we talk about all things nuanced with the commercial fishing lifestyle. And honestly, I had no idea what that entailed when I started dating my now husband about 10 years ago. I had no clue. I kind of knew that fishermen caught fish, obviously, in the ocean and sold it at a market, but I didn't realize how much that entailed. Not only of the giant boats they use and all the gear, but the freaking work that they do. And then I learned all the freaking work that the partners do, and they do it out of love, and they do it because it is a literal partnership. It is a team effort to keep these fishing businesses going. And that's what's so incredible about our community and that about this industry that is different than any other industry. We're very, very closely related to the military in many ways that I've talked about. And I know you know this too, but the dangerous job, number one, the long distance, the partners holding down the fort. However, what differs for us is that we are all individual businesses. We're not operating under one umbrella. We don't have a protocol. We don't have set ways to do things. We are all figuring it out on our own. And by the way, we're doing a great freaking job. So I just want to throw that out there. I've said freaking a lot. I think I'm feeling spicy today, but I just want to shout out that even when we're feeling that maybe we're not doing enough, and maybe we're feeling like I hate to use the word failing, but we're not meeting what we feel like we can meet. You're still doing better than you think. Always remember that you are doing better than you think. And there's nobody else out there that can do what you do. And I'm going to get a little esoteric here. The fact that we were built for this. We were made for this. And by we, I mean the people who have fallen in love with fishermen and the fishermen who have gone into this industry. We were chosen to be able to handle this incredibly unique, adventurous lifestyle. Holy adventure. I mean, the quality food that we get to share with our loved ones, the incredible quality time that we get to share with our fishermen when they are home, the incredible quality time that we get to share with ourselves when our fishermen are not home. I'm going to pause there. Embracing that individuality and independence is such a gift. It is such a gift to be able to nurture your needs, tend to your joys, do your hobbies, do your flow with yourself, your kids, whatever it is. Not every relationship gets to have that. Not every relationship gets to have two partners that are fully, incredibly formed adults that get to go off and have time to themselves to really get to develop themselves in unique ways, in ways that they want, and then come back together as a stronger unit. It's really, truly a gift. And I realized that, yes, coming back together can be challenging. And I've talked about it here, and I'm going to talk about it again. I know I'm not alone here, but that's a whole other episode, which I will also get to in the next probably month. I have it on my calendar. We're going to talk about that transition home because, it's nuanced. It's not just when they're gone for long periods of time. It's also when they're gone for just a day and they come home. It's also a way to rock all of our worlds. However, I want to talk about our episode today, which is with one of my dear friends in the commercial fishing space, Nicole Baker. She is the founder of Net Your Problem. So let's back it up a little bit. What happens to fishing gear when it's no longer usable, right? I'm sure partners out there are going, man, I'm looking at gear right now out my window. I'm thinking about all the gear in our garage or in just piled up next to that tree or whatever it is. But guess what? It turns out that gear, when it's no longer usable, can have a life of its own. And our friend Nicole will show us how. Because in this episode, she's talking about Net Your Problem, a groundbreaking initiative that helps commercial fishing communities recycle their old gear and reduce ocean plastic. Nicole is a marine biologist who saw firsthand how discarded gear damages marine ecosystems and gets sent to the landfills. And she decided to do something about it. Now she's working hand in hand with fishermen across the US to build sustainable, realistic solutions for waste in the seafood industry. So, whether you're on the water or holding it down at home, I know you hear me, this episode is packed with insights and inspiration and hope for the future of fishing and also for the future of getting your lawn back. Okay, shout out to getting that space back and also feeling good about it. You knowing that that gear has life, because really, and Nicole talks about it in this episode, the number one misconception is that fishermen do not care for the environment. We all know that that is absolutely not true. The majority of fishermen out there are probably the most aware and understanding of what's going to affect the environment than most people in the world. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Not only because, well, okay, let's start here. Because we want to have clean, beautiful fishing grounds for generations. We want to be able to deliver quality seafood. We want to be able to harvest bountiful seafood for seasons and seasons and seasons. And how do we do that? Is that we follow the regulations. We also make sure that we're cleaning up around us. And also fishermen and families, we freaking love the ocean. It's so calming. It's beautiful. It's an ecosystem that many people don't even know intimately, but we do. And that's another part of this lifestyle. We get to understand the ocean in such an incredibly intimate way that not everybody gets to experience. I mean, not everybody gets to live by the ocean, but even some partners don't live by the ocean. However, when your partner goes to sea, part of your heart does too. And that really does affect you. You know, that really does get ingrained in your system. That is part of the salt in all of our blood. Whether you're on their boat or you're at home, we are a part of that community. So thanks for letting me not ramble. Thanks for letting me speak from my heart, because that's really what it is. Thank you for letting me speak from my heart every week, but especially just now. And I think it's just a great way to introduce Nicole, because she really is such a dear presence in my life in this community and also to our community at large. So what do you say? Let's dive in. There's one subject that we're constantly talking about, whether on the podcast or in our Partners of Commercial Fisherman community, and that is safety. And here's a hard truth. Did you know 8 out of 10 fishermen lost at sea weren't wearing a PFD? It's time to change that. At Kent Safety Products, they make life-saving gear designed for real fishermen. No bulk, no hassle. Just protection that works when you need it most. They also have the most Coast Guard approved PFDs on the market. So whether you're fishing in hot or cold environments, a fisherman can find one to fit their needs. And partners, let's just pause for a moment and think about how much it would ease stress to know that your fisherman is protected each time they go to sea. It's a lovely thought, right? And as a side note, we only partner with companies that have heart, those who truly want the best for our fishing communities and have high quality products. That's why I am proud to have Kent Safety Products as a sponsor. Visit kentsafetyproducts.com and find the right PFD for you and your fishermen. That's kentsafetyproducts.com. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fisherman podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in. Nicole, one of my, I feel like soul sisters within the commercial fishing industry space. I'm so freaking happy to have you on the podcast. We did interview, God, it's been years, but I had you on the blog years and years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Like in maybe 2020, 2021. And man, so much has happened with Net Your Problem. And I'm so excited for people to learn more about it. So thank you so much for your time today. And you're coming in live from Alaska. I want to shout that out, which is amazing.
Yeah, from Cordova. That's where I'm at right now.
Oh, I know lots of people know that name in the fishing community. That's for sure.
Yeah. We're just getting ready for the Copper River salmon season. So that today is May 14th, but that starts on May 22nd. So everybody's like getting boats ready, and the air is electric with sort of that feeling, because this is considered sort of the official start of salmon season in Alaska. It's the area that has the first opportunities for fishing.
Interesting. Okay. So, because I always know it's like, because Chris usually would go up there in June, but I know that
Hmm.
he's gone in May before. And, I never know how much is boat prep and what's when he's actually launching every year. It kind of
Hmm.
changes, or maybe it
Yep.
doesn't change and it just changes in my brain. But how,
Yeah.
so, in Cordova right now, if you could guesstimate, how many people are actively in the commercial fishing industry or maybe about to go fish salmon in the total population, if you
Yeah.
could give a percentage?
Yeah, so there's 2,000 people that live in Cordova, and there's like 520 something permits. So not all of the people that fish in Cordova live here, but it is actually pretty different from Bristol Bay in that way, which a lot of people, fly up to Bristol Bay, fish, and then fly home after. Cordova is a significant like resident population, and the fishery is managed in a similar way to the Bristol Bay one, where you have like certain openers that people are allowed to fish. But here it's more like an opener on Monday and an opener on Thursday.
Mhm.
So people just like go out, fish for the day, come back, sleep in the bed with their wife and be at home with their family, and then a couple days later go and fish again and do the same thing. And that sort of continues over the summer, and they do a lot of different salmon species here. So whereas the Bristol Bay one is primarily sockeye, they do pinks and silvers and other salmon species here too. So it's so interesting how all the different areas have just like almost a totally different way of doing something. So it's really cool to get to be a part of all that as we travel around doing our recycling efforts.
Oh, yes. Okay, perfect segue. Please tell us what inspired you to start Net Your Problem, and maybe give a little background to people who haven't heard about your amazing company yet. So, what is Net Your Problem? What inspired you to start it? Like, what was the aha moment that pushed you to launch it?
Yeah, so basically, we describe ourselves as a maritime plastics recycling company. And we've broadened that scope a little bit from commercial fishing. That's where we started. That's what I had the background in, which I'll explain in a second. But now we basically help like cruise ship companies or tug and barge companies or aquaculture farmers, fishermen to find a non-landfill disposal option for netting and line when those materials have come to the end of their useful life, which they inevitably will after a certain time period. And the idea for that business came from when I was a fisheries observer. So in the United States, a lot of different fisheries have scientific monitoring and data collection, and scientists can live on board the vessels and write down information about what the fishermen are catching and where they're catching it. That data gets submitted to the government for them to help decide basically like how much people can catch and if the fishery needs to be reduced or expanded in some way. So I did that job for 5 years in Alaska after I graduated college from 2010 until 2015. So I was stationed in places like Dutch Harbor and Kodiak and Akutan, which are very big trawl populations, and Kodiak does a lot of other things too. You'll see Dutch Harbor is like commonly at the top, number one spot of fish landed every year. NOAA puts out this list of like the biggest ports by volume and the biggest ports by value. And so there's just lots of nets everywhere because there's a lot of fishing activity happening. So through that fisheries observer job is how I sort of became aware even that there were these nets sort of around. And then 2 years after I finished that job, I saw on Twitter that somebody in the Netherlands was sending nets to Denmark to be recycled, that there was this factory that was set up specifically to accept netting in line. And so I thought, oh, well, I know where there's a bunch of those nets. Maybe we could send them to Denmark too. So that's sort of how the whole idea came to pass. And then, yeah, we started sending nets to Denmark in 2017 from Dutch Harbor. And then it has sort of expanded over time to be in different places. And we don't just do trawl gear anymore. We do all kinds of netting in line from gill netting and seining and pot fisheries for lobster or crab. So it's expanded a little bit since the original idea.
Wow. So you guys are still sending nets to Denmark. Is that correct?
Um,
Recycled?
Yeah, we haven't in a while, but the idea is that the stuff that we collect on the East Coast would go to Denmark. And then stuff that we collect on the West Coast, we have recyclers in British Columbia or in Southern California. Some goes to Tennessee. So we've sort of broadened the destinations that we send materials to over the years. And it also now depends on the type of plastic that the materials are made out of. So just like household recycling, you have to sort things. We have to do the same thing. So depending on what kind of plastic it is, helps us figure out where it can go.
That's so amazing. I don't think I connected the dots before that you were shipping this overseas and that it's an international process that's going
Yeah,
down to really make sure that our fisheries are as it can be super or more environmentally friendly than they have been in the past. Exponentially. So wow,
yeah,
Nicole, amazing.
yeah.
I'm okay. Well, let's just keep going. So
Yeah.
okay, here's a question. I'm wondering when you started doing this, what did you learn about the fishing industry that others outside the industry might not understand?
This is a very easy question. It has been reinforced like time and time again as I introduce outside people to the fishing industry. So I think there's this general perception that fishermen just want to like rape and pillage the oceans and don't care about sustainability, that they're pirates, that they just want to take everything and throw their garbage in the ocean intentionally. And literally, that could not be further from the truth. I've heard fishermen say, like, we should reduce the quota of fish that we're catching. Or, I was on fishing boats. I never saw anybody like intentionally leaving nets in the ocean. They're very expensive, first of all. So if there is a net that gets lost or discarded, most of the time that is like for safety reasons, like it gets caught up on something and they've tried like for a long time to recover it and they just can't, or the weather is bad and something like happens. So it's these very like unusual, unforeseen circumstances in my experience of when material gets in the water. And as I brought like film crews or whatever like to these places to help me tell the story of what we're doing, and they'll interview fishermen, they're like, oh, they're just like regular people with jobs to feed their families. They're not this like pirate class of people, and they do really care. Like fishing is a very generational thing. Your grandpa did it, your mom did it, like you're now doing it. And so because of that familial connection, people want to leave the industry in a way that can make their offspring be successful also. So they can't take everything because their grandkids then won't have an opportunity to be able to enjoy the same lifestyle that they do. So I think that's the thing that I keep experiencing personally, but also other people will mention to me like, oh, I thought this, but like now after spending an hour with someone, I don't feel that way at all. It doesn't take a lot to be sort of brought over to the side where you sort of respect the relationship that fishermen have with the ocean as stewards of the resource rather than just straight up exploitation.
Man, first of all, I love hearing you speak. You're such an incredible speaker.
Well, thank
And
you.
you're so knowledgeable. You explain things in ways that people can really grasp, and you bring us there. And also, your voice is so calming. I could just listen to you talk all day. So I'm really
Yeah.
stoked about
Well, I
this.
hope people aren't falling asleep to my voice while
No,
they're
oh,
listening to this, but
no, it's too informative, but it is
yeah.
so soothing that we're able to ingest in that way.
Mhm.
And Yeah, I also want to say that so Nicole we met on through the blog. Well, we met online and then I
Hmm.
interviewed her for the blog. And then the first time we met was at the Pacific Marine Expo when I was speaking on a panel at the National Fisherman and she was sitting front row and it touched my heart so much that Nicole came. And then I mean, you filmed for me, you took pictures. I'm like, it was like BFF status
Yeah.
immediately. And I just
Yeah.
really just cherish our friendship and also the fact that I am connected to such an empowering, smart woman. So this
Oh,
is
thanks,
just really,
Megan.
really wonderful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I really respect what you're doing too. I mean, in my sort of history as a scientist and whatever, like I have dated fishermen, so I wouldn't currently identify as a partner of commercial fishermen, but I did in the past, and I really understand and get a lot of what you are trying to do and all the sort of unseen like labor that is involved in supporting a partner in sort of a very unique lifestyle. And I think it is something that is really, really needed to be recognized and supported. So I feel the same way about you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. That
Mhm.
really truly does mean a lot coming from
Yeah.
you. And I feel
Yeah.
like once a partner of a commercial fisherman, always a partner,
Yeah.
because that you have that experience and you have that whole other perspective of what it takes to bring seafood to the table. And
Yeah.
including recycling nets, taking it to the next level. So I love, okay, so you mentioned that you do other types of fishing gear. So what did you start with? And now what is we'll say the product catalog of your recycling? Because I
Yeah.
also know that people have contacted me on the blog wanting to connect with you. And I've sent
Yeah.
several people
Yeah.
to you.
That's
And
been really
so
useful.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear that. And
Yeah.
so anybody listening who's like, oh man, I have gear, I have stuff that I could recycle. What exactly can you recycle for them and where can they drop it off?
Yeah, so we do netting and line from maritime industries. So if you're a trawl fisherman, we can do trawl gear. If you seine or gill net, we can do both of those. And those nets are made out of the same type of plastic. It's nylon, which is, if you look on the tags of your shirts, like sometimes is made out of nylon. So that's been a real sort of when I first got started with this, I felt like I was on boats for 5 years and I never really made the connection that nets are made out of plastic, but they are, and same thing like my sweatshirt probably is too. It's a really weird concept. I feel like you look at a water bottle and you know that that's plastic, but looking at these materials, it's maybe not as obvious. So if you're looking at like your float line or your sink line on your pot or your lobster trap, that is also something that we can recycle. So I would say from a majority of the different gear types, we are able to do that recycling. It just requires most people to do like a little bit more work than what they would normally do. So, for example, in the pot and the trap fisheries, which are the same thing. They're just terms that are used differently on the east and west coast. But basically, you have lines that float on the water that are attached to the buoy, and then you have sinking lines that sort of connect the traps together. And those are made out of different materials. We can take both of them, but if you were to throw them away, you would probably like load them all in your truck, like all mixed together, because they're just going to go to the same location. But if you're going to recycle them, then we're asking to put all the float line in one bag or box and all the sink line in another bag or box. And so it's kind of just, I feel like simple things that you can change a little bit of your behavior, and then it really expands the options that we have for disposing of stuff. Um, if you're doing gill netting, which for those that aren't familiar is just a net that hangs vertically in the water and the fish swim into that. We use that a lot for salmon in Alaska and on the West Coast. And the cork line and the lead line normally are being reused. Just switch here. Yeah, those are being reused. So the web in the middle is the material that we're interested in recycling. And so the fishermen reuse the cork line and the lead line, and we just take the web that's in the middle. So that works out pretty good that they're already reusing part of it. And then for seining, it's a similar sort of thing to gill netting. You have a net that makes sort of like a bowl, and it captures like the school of fish in the bowl. And there's some other, they have a cork line and a lead line also, but they have some purse lines, which is what you pull and it sort of closes the bag of fish. So that needs to be separated out. But then on a seine, you have body web, which is made out of nylon, and it's sort of sewn to like a chafing gear, which is more of like a sacrificial kind of netting. So if you were to, cut a section of that out because you needed to replace it, it has holes in it or whatever, you just would throw that away like it is. But for recycling, then we want to take the chafing gear. We just need to like unlace that from the body web because we can recycle those, but they're made out of different kinds of plastic. So just kind of a few modifications that you need to make or think about when we're doing recycling. And if people are interested in it, great. If you think that's too much work or you don't care, like the landfill is still available for you to take your nets there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about when you're talking about separating the sinking line and the line that goes to the buoy with the lobster
Mhm.
traps. I'm thinking, well, that would be my job in the yard with Chris
Yeah.
is separating that because I love to organize. And that doesn't seem too bad. So it's not like we have to take it and get it power washed or anything. We just need to
Mm-mm.
separate it. That's awesome.
Separate it out. Yeah,
Okay.
because through the recycling process, if it's getting mechanically recycled, which is what we try to do the most of, the material is getting shredded up and then like rinsed or washed and pushed through a screen in order to make the little plastic beads. So there is already some kind of like cleaning and filtering out of debris. I mean, we try to like keep clumps of grass and stuff out, but there is sort of these processes built into the recycling program that it doesn't have to be like perfectly clean in order for it to get dropped off. And in a lot of times we like leave stuff outside and it gets rinsed off anyway. It's not like it needs to be in a in an Amazon fulfillment center kind of warehouse, where it's like kept, dry and whatever. So
Yeah. And yeah, and what you were talking about the purse-seining nets. Is that
mhm.
purse-seining nets? Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
I was thinking, man, that would be a great job for a greenhorn or a kid who wants to learn about commercial fishing. Be like, hey, sure, undo the netting here so we can go get it recycled. And there's probably greenhorns listening, being like, quit talking. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
you
Well, and I
know,
feel like a lot of people in my experience are not like fishermen, are not exceptionally familiar with like how to build a net or how to fix a net. It is a real skill that is developed over time. A lot of people like in Cordova or in Bristol Bay pay someone to do this for them. So they'll have their crew strip the net at the end of the year, and then they take those lines to somebody that does that professionally because they don't know how to do it. So I feel like if you are a young fisherman, this is a skill that would benefit you. And if you're taking something apart, that's a really good way to understand sort of how it's put together. And if you're cutting something up for recycling, it's okay if you make mistakes. It's just going to get sort of shredded up anyway. So it's a good opportunity to sort of practice and get familiar with how nets are put together and why you use certain materials. And same thing for buoys. It's like, why do you have two shots of this and one shot of that? And what is the knot that ties them together? And why are they spliced this way or that way? So it's I think it's something that fishermen could do to help get themselves familiar with, the materials that they're using.
absolutely. That would be such a great skill just to know to save money in the future and also to mend nets when and if needed.
Hmm.
That's great. I love it.
Yep.
Okay. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in gear recycling?
I would say the primary one is just that a lot of places the landfill is a free spot for people to drop off stuff. So when that happens, then there is very little incentive for people to do anything differently because they have this available free option that doesn't require them to pay any money or do any extra work. So I would say the landfill is sort of our biggest competition. And I participated in this small business accelerator program a couple of years ago, and they were like, yep, okay, businesses exist to do something like better, faster, cheaper, than their alternative. And businesses solve problems for people. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, like most of the people that I talk to don't initially think that taking their gear to the landfill is a problem. So first I have to like educate people that that is a problem. We shouldn't be doing that. So then, okay, say I get them on board for that. Then I have to say, okay, cool, I have the solution to your problem, but it requires more work, takes more time, and in some cases is more expensive. So that is not the best like pitch for a business. And so yeah, it really is just like the incentives are not the way that we deal with waste right now is just like not set up to incentivize doing the right thing. You have to like really care in order to want to do it, where it should be that the right way is the most easiest and the cheapest, but right now it's not. They're kind of flipped around. And I'll just say this so everybody listening is clear. Net Your Problem is set up as a business. We're not a nonprofit, which is a mistake that a lot of people make when they first hear about it. They're like, oh, why don't you go get a grant? Oh, why don't you go get volunteers to do this? And I am not the first person to have thought about recycling in Alaska. There have been a lot of efforts starting in 1989, actually, with the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. And in those examples, people will write a grant for 2 years, they'll do a project, and then when the grant funding runs out, poof, like
Right.
it's finished. And so the reason that I started this as a business was not because I want to be like driving a Lamborghini someday, but because I feel like that's the way to ensure that what I'm doing is able to keep going in the future, that you have set up a financial structure that enables you to continue the work in the future. So I feel like if we can make a lot of money sort of exploiting natural resources, we should also be able to somehow sustain recovering them and using them again. So that's just been hard because people are like, oh, well, if my net is worth something now, because I sell the materials that I collect to the recycling company, that's generally how the recycling world works. Fishermen are like, oh, now my net is worth something. Like, you should pay me for it. And I'm like, no, that is your garbage. You should be paying to responsibly get rid of that, like how you pay on your blue bin at the end of your driveway to get picked up. So I'd say the biggest challenge is sort of this whole mindset around who should pay for it, why we should do this, and sort of combating the current like incentive structure for waste management.
Interesting. Okay. I love that you explained how you are a small business. I totally appreciate and respect that process and decision. And I'm wondering, so when fishermen buy gear, they can write the gear off as for
Sure.
taxes because
Business
that's
expense. Yeah.
exactly. So I wonder, are there any kind of governmental, high five tax relief things for actually recycling your gear? Even though I know you're not a nonprofit, but is there
Yeah.
something that they can tap into that would kind of incentivize them to recycle gear?
Yeah. I'm not really sure. I would think that the money that you pay for recycling your gear would be a similar business expense
Mm.
that you could write off as part of the cost of doing your business. So you're going to take your waste oil somewhere, you're going to take your antifreeze somewhere, you're going to put your boat in storage over the winter. Like these are all just costs of doing business as a fisherman. So I'm not 100% sure, but to me, that doesn't seem like a stretch. So it would be something that is considered an expense as well, I think.
great point. That's something definitely to ask the accountant.
The tax
And
people. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that's such a good point, though. I mean, Lord knows we need more tax write-offs, and as small business owners
Right.
and commercial
Yeah.
fishermen who make chunks of money and then paying, oh man, at the end of the year, it's like, oh, or four
Yeah.
times a year, however you have it set up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for explaining all that.
Hmm.
And let's see, I would love to know. So you talked about, the misconceptions that there are, but what are some other ways that commercial fishermen and partners and women have responded to your efforts?
Well, I think generally speaking, everybody loves the idea. I've been doing this now for 8 years. I've met one person who thought it was a bad idea. And he was like, "Oh, you're trying to put the oil companies out of business." And I thought, if little old me could like take down BP and Shell and Exxon, like, I appreciate you think I have so much influence and power, but I obviously don't. Yeah, so generally people have been very receptive to the idea, and I think part of that is because our sort of marketing or outreach strategy or whatever involves talking one-on-one to people. So we'll be like in the boatyards or here in Cordova walking the docks and talking to people and explaining, okay, this is what you have to do. This is where it goes afterwards. I have like a knife and a pair of earrings that I'm wearing that are made out of 3D printed gill net web, and the handle of the knife is also made out of the web. So I think people maybe have lost a little bit of trust in the recycling system. You see these statistics that say like only 10% of plastic gets recycled, or you put your stuff in your blue bin at the end of your driveway if you have residential pickup, and you're like, I have no idea where this goes. Like, is this actually getting recycled? I have no idea. You see sometimes these stories of people that will like get in their car and then they'll like follow along the garbage truck and see like where the stuff actually goes. So yeah, I think people have been very responsive to that because I think we're able to illustrate the whole process of what happens, and then people are like, okay, like I feel pretty good about this. Maybe I will like have my greenhorn unlace the chafe gear from the body web of my seine, because I feel like I know that this actually is something good is going to happen from this extra work.
As you know, safety is one of our biggest concerns as partners of commercial fishermen. So if you or someone you know has been injured while working on the fishing vessel, you don't have to navigate it alone. Do you know your rights and what happens after an injury? Would you like proactive legal education before issues arise? Need expert guidance before making decisions that could impact your case? Attorney Michael Flynn has been fighting for injured fishermen for decades. And as a side note, we only partner with sponsors who genuinely care about commercial fishing families, which is why I'm proud to introduce Michael as a sponsor of the POCF community. You can contact him today for a consultation at flynnworkus.com. That's FLYNNWIRKUS.com. And tell him that the Partners of Commercial Fishermen sent you.
So
Interesting.
yeah, and I think ultimately the way that we have been able to expand to different places, so we do like Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, so the whole West, and then we're doing now Maine and Massachusetts on the East Coast. And then when Katie and I visited you last year, that was because we were on a road trip through the Southeast. So we're trying to offer in all the coasts of the US, and that has primarily come about because people will see like your blog, for example, and then be like, oh, I fish in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Like, this is really cool what you guys are doing in Alaska. Could we do that here? So it has primarily, the expansion come about of people being interested to have access to this kind of service where they're fishing out of.
Oh gosh. Okay. So great. So many nuggets. Okay. So if somebody reaches out, or if they reach out to you and they're like, I'd like to recycle my gear, what's the first step? How do you guys work through that process?
Yeah, the first thing is to figure out where they are. So if we have some place that they can already be plugged into dropping it off. And so we have a big warehouse in Seattle and in Massachusetts. So the Seattle place sort of consolidates a lot of loads from Alaska, and the Massachusetts one is like for Cape Cod and those areas like in Gloucester and whatever for those. And Rhode Island actually uses the Massachusetts one. So people can go there and like drop off their materials. We also have sort of like outdoor storage yards, I would say, that are like self-service drop-offs. So like we have one in Kodiak where you call me and I give you the information and you weigh your gear and you drop it off there yourself. And then we do shipments every so often. In like Bristol Bay, for example, because the fishery is so short, we just have like over the 2 months that the fishery is, we're there in the beginning and we're there at the end, and then that sort of like closes up shop for the rest of the year. So if you're near a place where we already have a collection spot, we can just give you the information of how to participate there. But more what I would love is people to be like, oh, I'm in Mississippi and like we don't currently do something in Mississippi. I don't live in Mississippi. I only been there once. So then it's like, okay, help us to come up with a system of how that would work for you. Like, where do you go regularly? Where would the drop off be? Like, what time of year are you normally going through your gear? Like, who could help move stuff around? What are the equipment operators? So, in the places where we don't currently have things set up, I'm not going to be like, well, this is how we're going to do it in Mississippi because I don't know anything about that. We're trying to develop programs that work for fishermen. So help us figure out how to design a program because then it would work for you. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do rather than like prescribe things or try to get like new rules about things. It's like, let's all just work together to figure out a way to do this differently rather than have somebody else tell us what to do.
Amazing. And so for the storage places that you have right now, like in Seattle and you said Massachusetts, was it?
Yeah.
What, so the gear's there. So then what? Do you then have the logistics of putting it on a barge or do you have it, if on the East Coast, is it then put on a ship to be sent to Denmark? Like, where does it go after it's been put in the storage
Yeah.
unit?
So the next step after the nets being in the warehouse is that they get sorted into the different plastic types. So like a trawl, for example, has to be taken apart. It's made out of a lot of different materials. And then each of the materials gets baled up. So if you think of like a hay bale, that's like a squish down thing with these straps around it. That's what we do with the netting and the lines too. So the materials go into the baling machine, they get squished down, and we make these like rectangle blocks of netting and line. And then that is what gets loaded either onto a flatbed or into an ocean freight container. And that is the material that we sell to the recycling company. And so then the recycling company's job is to shred it up and make the plastic pellets that they then sell to the companies that are making whatever widget out of plastic. So they can be transported a variety of different ways, but primarily it's trucks and ocean freight containers. Some people will kind of push back a little bit on that and say like, oh, but what about the emissions associated with that transportation? And so normally what I try to share is ocean freight shipping is one of the most environmentally friendly of all the transportation options. You do have emissions, obviously, but there's so many containers that are on one vessel that the carbon emissions get sort of, if you have like that ship emits whatever, 100 tons of carbon. If you have 1 million containers on there, each container gets only a very small fraction of that overall emissions. Whereas if you're trucking something, the truck is one container on a truck. So that container absorbs the entire emissions of that journey. Um, So of all the shipping options, that is the most environmentally friendly. And then if you think about sort of the life cycle of plastic, it comes from oil. So if you're not going to recycle plastic, you have to take into account what is the environmental impact of extracting petroleum from the ground and refining it and transporting it somewhere to turn into virgin plastic, which is what your plastic widget is going to be made out of if you're not making it out of recycled plastic. So the the factory in Denmark has actually done some studies. If you look at like the final manufacturing process to make something from their recycled plastic versus virgin plastic is 83% less carbon emissions. So, I mean, very significant. This isn't like a couple percent. This is like a big deal to make something out of recycled plastic instead. So
Oh my
that's
gosh.
my soapbox about carbon emissions because a lot of people ask about that. I'm like, okay, yes, like we do have to drive, we do have to like emit carbon for our lifestyle, but
You just click. I mean, so many dots just connected for me, honestly, because I was like, what is this guy talking about? She's going to take down the oil company. Now I get it.
yeah.
Second one, I hope you take
Yeah.
them down. Second one, the carbon emissions. Because even on Amazon, whenever you're like, oh, I'm going to get my package the next day or 2 day shipping will save this much
Mhm.
on carbon emissions. Or if you buy a plane ticket, this ticket is, and I'm like, how the heck do they even calculate that? But now I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
This makes
Yep.
so much sense. I love this. Okay. Also want to do a
Yeah.
shout out when you were here in January of 2024, which I can't believe it was that long ago.
That long. Yeah.
I know. And you and Katie came, who I love so much. And she is a shining little soul, beautiful person. And I've loved it. Well, I really was hoping that you guys would have a recycling center here because I wanted to see you more. But let's do a shout out to North Carolina was the fact that what was it? Drum roll. Why didn't you guys set up a facility here?
Well, I think not that we necessarily won't, but it's just like you have to find a place where enough material is being generated. And so on our trip, we felt like the Outer Banks maybe would have been a good spot because there was a lot of gill netting there, which is sort of what our recon trip was about, trying to find like some pretty solid sources of nylon plastic. Um, so that's what we kind of felt like maybe there could be a good spot there. But then, yeah, then we went through like the whole Gulf and we were like, oh my God, like all these shrimp nets that are like everywhere. But what we learned about the shrimp nets was that they were lasting people like 20 years because every year they would dip them in these like poly I think it was polyurethane dips. So it was like the nets were like hung high up in the air and like hanging down and they would just like put them in a tub of this coating and that coating would like protect the netting for such a long time. So it's a nightmare when you're thinking about recycling it at the end of its life, but it's extending the useful life of the materials. So we were like, oh, wow, there's not really too much like to be thrown away every year because of the way that they're doing this with the coding. But yeah, that trip was I mean, we just learned so many new things about how fishing is done in the Southeast. You have like a lot of shark problems. So with the shrimp, so some of the netting also has like a copper, like a very thin copper wire that goes through the netting that makes it so that if the sharks bite it, they can't like rip through the netting as easily. Again, a nightmare for recycling if you have this thin metal thing going through your netting, but I get the reason why. And if you're able to protect your netting, then you're not throwing it out as much. So that's a good thing. But yeah, I was like, this is going to be hard down here to like figure out how to overcome all of these recycling challenges. But I do think one thing that could be really interesting in the Gulf and in the Southeast is just the different industries. So like workboat, tug and barge, like all the oil and gas platforms that are being serviced. So I think that may be more of like where we go, is starting to collect those kinds of materials first and then try to figure out these tough fishing recycling challenges.
Interesting. Okay. Let's move on to, can you share a success story where a fishing community made a big shift thanks to Net Your Problem?
Um, I would say I think the Massachusetts stuff is going pretty good. Um, those guys, when I first started Net Your Problem, were like, we are not doing this. We are not paying for this. We are not interested in this. There's a lot of sort of entrenched ideology, perhaps like on the East Coast that I was not aware of. I feel like we don't have as much of that on the West Coast sometimes. And so it was very hard to like change people's way of doing things. And a lot of my experience on the West Coast just did not translate over to the East Coast. So it was like in Dutch Harbor, just using that as an example, like boats are paying to store stuff in storage yards, including nets that are no longer useful. But in Massachusetts or like in Maine, people are just keeping it in their front yard. So they're not paying anything for that. So I can't really use that now as an incentive of like why you should recycle, that you're saving the storage fees. And so I think like as we've been doing things there, we've been able to sort of shift mindsets, I guess, or whatever a lot more than I thought might initially be possible. And yeah, I think generally if you just make it easy for people, I mean, every time Katie's at the warehouse, she's sending me pictures of like people dropping off stuff, which is really cool. And one of the gear shops there, Radars, they build trawls, like they're bringing stuff to her that is like already stripped and separated. And I know that that is different than what they were doing before. So you can see it. You can see in people like when we have these one-on-one conversations, like at first they're like, I'm not doing that, Nicole, like too much work. And I'm like, come on, like it's really not, you know? And so here's a way you could strip your net to keep the twine out instead of what you were doing before. So if you're just sort of like collaborative and try to explain things, I think we've seen people's, minds sort of like shift all over, really.
That's great. Shout out to Massachusetts. Keep up the good
Yeah.
work, y'all. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, what partnerships have been essential to scaling your impact? And have any surprising industries or company used the recycle gear that you know of?
Yeah. So I think something that was so interesting for me in the beginning was I thought, okay, this is the way I set things up in Dutch Harbor. So now I'll just copy and paste this all over the US and we'll do the exact same thing. And that could not have been further from the truth. Like every place that we recycle is a totally different situation. So scaling is actually very difficult. You have to basically reinvent what you are doing in a new geography. And so, for example, like in Cordova, the program was run by the Copper River Watershed Project, which is a nonprofit that is based here. So, the way that the program works here is the Watershed Project had the staff member that would man the events. The nets would be dropped off at the city, like transfer station. The city staff would help bale the nets and load them in the containers and all of that. And then I would receive the materials. So that's sort of like a three-way partnership that because I don't live here, I cannot be the one like managing all of this. So that's like a city and a nonprofit partnership. But then if you look at like Dillingham in Bristol Bay, that role is being what do you say, taken over by the Chuyung tribe there. So they are the ones that are collecting the materials and baling it and sending it to me. If you look at like what we were doing in Kodiak back in the past. It was like a construction company was loading the containers for us, or we did thing in California when drift gill nets were phased out, I guess that type of gear is no longer able to be used. So we were like doing this in the parking lot of a brewery, taking nets apart. And so we like to say that we work with unlikely partners, that anybody who is interested in being a part of this and has like space or equipment or funds. We've worked with Grundens in the past. They have paid for the baling machine that we have in Naknek because they currently have a line of products called Net Sourced that uses the recycled nylon in some of their board shorts and leggings. And they they made a film about us a couple of years ago, like explaining the whole process. So yeah, it's just been like a lot of different types of organizations, cities, tribes, nonprofits, businesses that have all been able to find a way to participate. And ultimately, yeah, if people are using the recycled product, then that makes the demand for our collection services exist. So if nobody wants to buy the recycled plastic, then it doesn't make sense for me to collect it.
Totally. So, what would you say to partners or families of fishermen who want to support sustainability but don't know where to start?
Well, I would say first thing for the families is we just made a video, actually. Oh man, the sun is coming up now. You can't even see me
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
Coming up in Alaska. Yeah, it's
Coming up
eight.
at
Yeah.
8:54. Yeah.
Yep. 12:54 where I am.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the families, I would say we actually just produced a video that's on our YouTube channel about a Lopez Island family in Washington that they had like decades of gear in storage and finally decided like, okay, now is the time to go through and recycle that. But I feel like a lot of different families could really identify with the Solberg and the Higgins family. And so if you want to check that video out, it sort of like goes through like their story as a fishing family and how they decided to get rid of their gear. But I feel like a lot of families do have this like in their front yard or in their warehouse or whatever, all of this old gear. So if that is you, if that sounds like, oh shit, she just got me, like just reach out to us and we'll figure out like how to get you plugged into an existing thing that we have or start a new one.
I love that. I know partners are like, how do I free up my garage? Like, how do I
Right. Yeah.
free up this storage in the back? Oh, hell yeah, we're about to recycle this bee. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, oh, that's so good. So, and they can find it at netyourproblem.com, correct?
I don't think it's on the website yet, but on our YouTube channel.
YouTube. Got
Yeah,
it.
that's
Okay.
listed on there. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. And so, how can everyday consumers support the mission of Net Your Problem?
Yeah, I love this question because I think everybody really does have a role to play, even if you don't have, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't even have any netting to get rid of. And it's sort of related to what I was just saying, is that if there is no demand for the recycled plastic in the marketplace, it doesn't make sense for me to collect it. So if you care about recycling and you want that to be available, you have to purchase products that then are made from that recycled plastic later on. So if you go to the grocery store, and this is what I try to say too, like to be an informed consumer, you want to know like where those products come from, but also what materials those are made out of. And it's not hidden. Like companies are really trying to advertise that they are using recycled plastic in their products. So it'll be on the tag, it'll be like on the label saying like made with whatever, 100% recycled plastic, or boxes will say that like this is made from 30% recycled content. So I mean, again, I feel like this is the answer to a lot of things, but like vote with your wallet, like spend money on things that you value. And if you value recycling, then buying things made with recycled plastic truly really does help drive the whole recycling system.
I love that. Vote with your wallet. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense because then more people are going to want to buy that recycled plastic or whatever it is to make their products. And
Yeah. And if you
yeah,
have two things on a shelf, one is made of recycled and one isn't, and this one is selling more, they're going to make more of that. They're
right.
going to be like, oh, people want this, so we should be making this because that's how we're going to make money. So you signal to companies your values with the purchases that you make, and they will respond accordingly.
Thank you for explaining that because I have looked at things where I'm like, oh, cool. But then, does this make a difference even more? And then also, is there, which it does now that I know this,
Yeah.
but is there, if something is a recycled product, can it be recycled again?
Yeah, it can.
Okay.
So most of the time people say that plastic can be recycled like 7 times before it just gets like too degraded to have the properties that it needs to have. But like aluminum, for example, that can be recycled indefinitely. So yeah, there is like a lifespan of doing that. But I think what makes something, how do I say that? Like what makes it easier to be recycled again is a lot about the design of the product. So if you have a product and like the cap is one kind of plastic and the tube is another and the label is another, and then you have a sticky glue on there, and that just makes it like really hard to recycle at the end of its life. So again, this is like if you want to be really into this, look at how a product is designed. Like a lot of times they have on the label like ways to recycle. So it's going to say like for a toothpaste thing, the cap you have to take off. This is not recyclable. You have to peel the label off. That's just like a nightmare for recycling. So again, just like choosing things where it's like all one kind of plastic without these fancy labels and whatever things, that makes it easier at the end of its life.
That's such a great point. And this reminds me, we have friends that live part-time in Japan, and they were saying how the recycling there and the trash, they are immaculate. Everything has to be cleaned, separated to the T, or you will get fined. I think they have like
Yeah.
7 different trash receptacles, but incredible to see. When I was a kid and military kid, which is one of the
Mhm.
inspirations of why Partners of Commercial Fisherman was started, because we are so closely related to that experience of military spouses. Is when we lived in Germany, they called it on the economy. We didn't live on base. So
Okay.
we were the only Americans in our neighborhood or in the area, in the town that at that time. And learning how they recycled. I mean, the Germans are on it too. They feel like from my understanding, they are leaders within recycling and getting it down to making sure everything's clean, separated. The food is always composted. It was really incredible to see that on different levels. But that is true, just to look at different products and say, what's going to be the easiest one to actually regenerate into something else and not have to, yeah, the glue, like that is a whole other thing. Like there's
Yeah.
the labels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is way outside of my area of expertise, really, but
Right.
it's just like, yeah, it needs to be thought about, or
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be, yeah, keep being at a 10% recycling rate, because
Right.
ultimately that stuff is just too contaminated. And so it ends up in the garbage, even if
Right.
you put it in the recycling bin to begin with.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. And local recycling centers, some of them, well, I know Wilmington, North Carolina, they have a lot of great information too. So you can call your local recycling center as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it varies too. Like you
Right.
guys, go back and forth between North Carolina and California. So what you can recycle in California is going to be different
Right.
than North Carolina. So yeah, it really is like a regional thing of
Right.
what your municipality has been able to secure,
Mm-hmm.
contracts to sell or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can't really say everybody can do one thing. The United States
Exactly.
is so big with so many different, structures for how cities manage waste.
Right. Yeah. And from my understanding in Wilmington, it's illegal to throw away oyster shells. You have to take it to a specific place to reuse them, which I love.
Yeah.
And yeah, coastal towns, they always, yeah, check your local recycling and
Right.
trash and see what's up.
Yeah,
Okay. So
exactly.
here we're switching gears a little bit. And as personal friend to friend too, advice, what advice would you give women trying to make a change in traditionally male dominated industries like commercial fishing?
Oh, geez.
Solve the
Um,
world, the women's problems right now. Let's
solve
go.
the women's problems. Yeah. I mean, I guess just I feel like I want to say something about like self-confidence, which is just like if you have it and you believe that you're like on the right path, people will follow you. I mean, like I'm not going to say that I haven't ever like had, challenging experiences because of that. Like even yesterday I was like in a meeting with so it was me and two other men and the men were talking to each other,
Right.
like not looking at me. And that just really gets my goat sometimes. I'm like, hey, I'm like also part of this conversation. So, I mean, I do have like experiences like that, but I feel like if you have a little bit of self-confidence and you're dedicated to your mission and you just go in like guns a-blazing, like nobody really can have anything to challenge you on. So, I don't know if that's really like advice or not, but like be true to your convictions and like believe and know that you're on the right path if you are and hopefully people will just see that and it won't matter so much like what what gender you are. It
Mhm.
people will just have to follow along with the change that you're trying to make because it will just make sense and you're doing it in a smart way and in an inclusive way that people don't feel like they're being trampled all over. Nobody
No,
likes that. So,
no, not at all. That's great advice and a great reminder.
yeah.
And I feel the more that women share stories like this, it's more helpful to say, okay, well, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one being ignored here, or I'm not the only one that's being passed over for whatever it is. And, of course, not all males are created equal. I've had
Right.
so much
Yeah.
great support from males in my life. But yeah, there are instances as women where you feel that you're just totally being glazed over. I have a woman, she's a mentor to me, and she is in her 80s and she worked, I mean, in the high ups of military. She had the military clearance. She had all these things. And I think she was at the Pentagon. I could be getting this story wrong, but she was at this huge meeting, big round table. She was the only woman there. This was in either the 70s or the 80s. And she she kept trying to say something, but people would interrupt her and she couldn't get her voice in. And she said that she got so frustrated, she just laid her head on the table, like put her face on the table, like I'm over
I
this.
might as well be sleeping because
Right.
you guys are not listening to
Yeah,
me.
exactly. And she said that
Yeah.
actually they were like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I just want to be heard." And so then they listened up. I'm like, "Dang, that is a move." And heck yeah, she got her voice heard, but it was so interesting that she's like, "I was trying this whole time." And then I was like, "Screw it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna lay down." But
Well, and I
yeah,
think like in this industry in general, like natural resources, let's say if we extend it like that, I mean, there are studies that show that like women tend to think more long term
right.
than men think more in the short term.
Yep.
So if you're thinking about like who would I want to be a natural resource manager, you want somebody who is like thinking about what is the resource going to be like in 10 years versus what is the resource going to be like in 2 years. So I think there are like I don't want to say sustainability is like more innate like to women, but there definitely is this difference in like we're trying to think so much further. And I think that that is a big advantage like when you're trying to think about how can we do things differently or improve because things have been going one way for a while, like you need new ideas. You need to try to do something different. And just because, and maybe it doesn't work out, but like you should still try and see if there is a different way of doing something
Mhm.
that could, reduce environmental impact like really broadly. And I think those ideas can sometimes come a lot from women because of the long-term sort of, I don't know what about our brains like makes us like that, but that is a thing.
I totally agree. I feel like
Yeah.
women, heads of their household, we are in so many ways. I heard a saying once that they say men may be the head of the household, but women are the neck.
Yeah.
That was so interesting. We help guide the head where to look,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also, because we're also thinking about not just ourselves, we're thinking about everyone. What is this going to look like for our families? And not saying that men don't, but generally women are more thinking about a group. It's
Yeah.
more of the
Hmm.
group, and such a great point. I think also just talking with you, it's like find other women in your community who you can share stories with, like who are leaders in their community that you can
Hmm.
talk to and find that empowerment just by connecting with them. Say, hey, can I grab a cup of coffee with you? I'd love some advice on how to tackle this upcoming council speech that I'm about to give, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and we're here for you. The POCF community is also always here for you, and we get you on so many levels. So many women leaders in the POCF community. I'm just like blown away. In our private chat,
Yeah.
I just listen. I'm just watching and listening and learning so much about how much they are contributing back to their communities, and watching them brainstorm ways to help their communities and other communities, sharing different contacts of who to write emails to. I mean, it is way more than I ever thought it would be. It's
Yeah.
incredible. So if anybody
Yeah.
is interested in that, the link is in the show notes, of course, with all of
Yeah.
Nicole's incredible resources and connections
Mhm.
as well. So thank you for that. And so speaking of looking towards the future, what's next
Yeah.
for Net Your Problem? And do you have any exciting projects on the horizon?
Yeah, so this summer is kind of just like bopping around to the different recycling spots. So I'm in Cordova now. After this, I'm going to be driving with Katie down from Alaska to Seattle. So we're doing the Alcan road trip again. That's 2,500 miles through primarily like the Yukon and BC, which, yeah, when we drove up is just like gorgeous. I'm really looking forward to that trip. And then we'll be in Seattle for a little while. My parents are flying from New York. Sarah's coming from California. Luke's coming from Maine. And we're all going to basically be working on processing all of the material that's in the Seattle warehouse and getting that off to the recycling company. So that's one of the fun things about being a small business too, is like the whole family gets involved. My boyfriend will help too when he's finished working. So we'll do that. And then we'll be headed up to Naknek to start our recycling program for Bristol Bay. So that's on the 7th of June. And then we'll be back there again at the end of July when the season wraps up. And I'm going to be headed to Newport, Oregon in September. So we're going to get our like trawl dismantling facility set up there. I'm having a lady who is like a real, yeah, maritime badass lady, help me put together sort of like a net reel with like a power system that can help pull the net along as we take it apart. So that'll be really exciting to get that set up. Yeah, and then the winter and fall is winter is more for like scheming for next year. Fall is more like shipping then all the materials that we've collected over the summer and getting them to the recyclers. Um, yeah, we'll see what happens then too, because stuff always pops up. Every time I open my email, I'm like, what is going to be in there? Like, who is
Right.
going to have written me and what can we do with these ideas?
I love that your whole family and then all the other people, a part of Net Your Problem are coming together to work on this. And it's not
Hmm.
just y'all passing it off to somebody else. It really shows the dedication of every single person involved in Net Your Problem. And heck yeah, who wouldn't want to support that? So
Yeah, it's fun.
go team. That's
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting when you think of like what a CEO of a business is. Sometimes I'm like in the Senate in Washington, D.C., but then also sometimes I'm like wearing my overalls and all dirty and like cutting stuff up. So it's like we just actually posted a funny thing for Small Business Saturday, which was this past Saturday, and it was this video and it was like meet the team, and then it was like a picture of me CEO, a picture of me CFO, picture of me sales, picture of me HR. It's just like that's how small businesses go, where like you're just doing all the different roles and you're, yeah, like fancy outfits giving presentations and then like wiping sweat off your face the next day.
Oh my gosh, I feel that on a visceral
So
level. That's
that
so
also
good.
just makes it fun too.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was we
totally.
I just recently hired a social media lady to help us with doing our YouTube and with the Net Your Problem LinkedIn page. So that was her idea to make like one of I think that's kind of like a trend that she saw like where people were doing this. I'm like, yeah, I totally identify with this one. Please go ahead and make that
Yeah.
one.
Oh my
So,
gosh, I'm already thinking, I'm like,
yeah.
okay, I want to do one. That is
Yeah, you should.
hilarious.
Yeah.
And I felt
Yeah.
that yesterday. I was in a meeting with an organization where they wanted to learn more about the Partners of Commercial Fishermen. I'm always so happy to talk with organizations and companies about what the Partners of Commercial Fishermen represent, the
Hmm.
underserved, beautiful, incredible, invisible labor of the women and partners behind commercial fishermen. And so I'm sitting there and they said, well, if you want to stay on, you're more than welcome, or you can pop off. We're just going to have the rest of our company meeting. And I was like, oh, I'm going to stay on just to see how an actual
Yeah.
company within the commercial fishing space runs. And so, people were going around, they're like, okay, it's your turn. And this person had a presentation. I was like, man, that's one person's job. Like I'd do that. And there was another one had this incredible presentation. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I do on Wednesdays. And then it was just funny that they go around the room. I'm like, dang, that's so nice to know that. Oh, that's how big companies function or bigger organizations. Like, oh, one person can have that task. That sounds like a dream. Like, I
Right,
can't
yeah.
wait for that to
And if
happen.
this
And
was a meeting of the partners of commercial fishing, it would be Megan's giving this presentation. Megan's
right,
giving this presentation.
it would be
Megan.
me looking in the
Next up
mirror.
is Megan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. And you know what? And my dream is to obviously hire people closely related to the fishing industry, if not partners, because I know they're so busy. But man, I would love this to grow where it can employ other partners of commercial
Yeah.
fishermen, because that's
Yeah.
really what it's all about. But
Yeah.
yeah, right now, and you know what? I'm happy. Obviously, I'm happy to do it because we love what we do, and we're fortunate enough to be able to continue this. But man, it's if it wasn't for the community that inspires me every day, I wouldn't have this kind of
I've given up a
energy.
long time ago.
I'm like, help me. Yeah, if nobody wrote me an email, I'd still be like, am I alone? Like, this is intense and I have nobody to
Yeah.
talk to. And I'm just so freaking thankful for everybody who's reached out to make me feel like I'm less alone so I can share with others that we're not alone. And look at all this
Yeah. They
incredible
need
freaking
you.
stuff we're doing. Like,
Yeah.
I need them. We need each
Yeah.
other. Like,
Yeah.
we got this. Everyone
Yeah.
listening. Okay, went off on a tangent, but it was a good one. So, where can listeners learn more about Net Your Problem and get involved? And can you name all the places online where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. So the main one is the website, netyourproblem.com, which we're actually in the middle of updating because my ex-husband made the old one. So we're getting rid of that, getting a new one. So it's not the best at the moment, but we also do like a lot of social media. So Nicole Baker, which yeah, that's me on LinkedIn, and Net Your Problem is also on LinkedIn. And then Net Your Problem is on Instagram with just at Net Your Problem is the name. And then we have a YouTube channel, which is at Net Your Problem is the channel name. And then we also have a Facebook page too, but that's sort of linked to the Instagram. So the same stuff gets posted on both of those.
Cool.
But
Awesome.
yeah.
And so, is there a quote or a philosophy of life that guides you through your work and
Oh,
your life?
I just texted somebody this yesterday, actually. I said, this is the Net Your Problem philosophy. I said, everything happens at the right time for the right reason. So I feel like sometimes we try to do something one way and there's a lot of roadblocks. Like it feels like you just keep pushing up against something, pushing up. And that to me is an indication that the universe is like, no, Nicole, you should not be going on that path. You should be going on a different path. And eventually you will figure out why you weren't supposed to go on that path. So I just try to like move through the world with the least resistance as possible. Like if you're trying to work with a partner and it just feels hard, maybe that's not the right partner for you to be working with. Maybe if you scrap that, let's think, reimagine a new way of doing it, then you can just sort of go with the flow down that river and it will be a little bit easier. So I think yeah, I try not to force things. I try to just let things happen very naturally, because then it feels like you're not forcing people to do something they don't want, or they don't want to be involved, and it just ends up being more successful, and you will realize when it works out why the first one didn't.
Right. That's such a great philosophy and so true in so many different ways, including the people in your life. Like I've talked
Yeah,
about this too. It's like the path of least resistance is even with the people that you associate with, whether
yeah,
that's, more personally on a deeper level, or if it's passing, acquaintances, like, do we really got time for that? Like, no, what are we
yeah,
trying to prove? There's nothing, we're not, let's quit trying to people please and just do what we can do that's going to serve us the best in the way that will help us serve others the best. It's
yeah.
not,
Hmm.
otherwise we're just going to be pissed off and well, as we all know. I
Hmm.
love that philosophy. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this, the final question is, if your younger self could see what you're doing now, what do you think she would say?
She would not recognize me, because I feel like I wanted to be a marine biologist for my whole life. I went to SeaWorld when I was in fifth grade, and I asked the killer whale trainer there, like, how do I get to be you someday? And she was like, okay, you get a marine biology degree with a psychology major, and you get to be scuba certified. And that's exactly what I did. And then I did an undergrad in marine biology, and I did a master's degree in marine biology, and I was working at a university as a fisheries biologist, like just 10, whatever, yeah, 10 years ago. I was working at a university in Seattle, and that was sort of like the epitome of what a successful marine biologist would have been. I was in a lab that didn't have funding issues, and we were publishing in prestigious journals and everything that a scientist would have wished for. And then I, 2 years ago, decided to quit that to go on this crazy road of being a recycling person. So I think your previous self may not recognize your future self, but I've sort of always tried to make decisions in my life that just like make me happy. Like if you come in a fork, like which one is going to make me happy? And that's what led me to be here. And yeah, sometimes am just totally crushed with like responsibility and whatever, but a majority of the time it feels really good to be doing what I'm doing. And I am very happy with the path that I'm on, but who knows what that path will like continue to be. I feel like there's so many, you know, recycling challenges and opportunities that need solutions. So who knows where I will end up with in the recycling world, but it feels very very fulfilling at the moment. So I think I'll stick with this for right now.
Such a great way to end. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Nicole, for your time. And I'm excited for people to know more about Net Your Problem. I mean, I thought I knew more about Net Your Problem, but this totally opened up my eyes in so many different ways. And I truly appreciate everything that you do and your team does. And
Mhm.
I love that you're in Alaska right now. Alaska feels like a second home to me, and I've never even been there because of
We'll
my
have to get
fisherman's
you up.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need to come up. I need to come
Yeah.
visit. So
Yeah.
thank you so much again for your time, and look forward to keeping up with Net Your Problem. Did you know that there are no mandatory stability requirements for commercial uninspected fishing vessels in the U.S.? The Seaworthy Foundation is tackling this issue head-on through a federally funded project by the National Institute of Health. They're also in New Bedford, Massachusetts, launching an innovative head protection project, developing helmets designed to keep fishermen safe without interfering with their work, similar to flotation device programs. In addition, they're mapping vessel hazards firsthand, surveying crews to identify blind spots in dangerous areas, creating essential safety guides for greenhorns and new crew to navigate vessels safely. To learn more and support their mission, visit seaworthyfoundation.org. That's seaworthyfoundation.org. Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you'd tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, Go to POCFpride.com for weekly vlogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.